Today's video is going to be a bit different from the usual. You see, when I discuss games, I tend to focus on the aspects that I didn't gel with. It's easier for me to identify the things I have a problem with and suggest fixes that I believe would improve the game. Well, today we'll be heading in the opposite direction because I enjoyed the game so much that I struggle to find any significant flaws in it. So without further ado, let's discuss why Resident Evil Requiem is so f***ing awesome. I should also mention that for those of you who haven't played the game, there will be spoilers up ahead, but I'll try my best to omit any major plot points, the final act, and things that I deem worthy of experiencing for the first time. Also, I took the liberty of switching up the perspectives of each character for a bit of variety. I'm sure you're tired of seeing Grace and Leon from the same perspective. All footage, by the way, was recorded from my second playthrough, which I treated as a victory lap and allowed myself to use special content like new weapons for extra spice and simply indulged in my second run through. So once again, be warned, if you plan to play it in the future, I recommend you stay away from spoilers and experience it all for yourself.
What do I do?
So let's begin with Grace herself. I thought she was an incredible character and the perfect vector for carrying players through this familiar yet reimagined signature gameplay model. By that I mean allowing us to experience new horrors with fresh new eyes in a sense. Grace is an inexperienced field operative and it shows. She's shaky with a gun, she stumbles over herself, literally and in a dialogue. She second guesses everything and seems to lack any confidence in the presence of anyone but her mother. But at the same time, she's quick-witted and smart enough to assume the experience of the player, doing things and reacting in ways that align with the long-time fans of the series.
Weird. How do people normally get in here?
To top it off, Angela Santalbano gives an amazing performance that adds an extra layer of depth to the character. This was especially welcome after our last new main protagonist, Ethan Winters, was just so bland and forgettable, to put it simply.
Give me a fucking break!
Speaking of bland and forgettable, the zombies in previous games were forgettable in that they were simple, mindless, flesh-hungry monsters. While they still hunger for the forbidden meat in Requiem, this time around they have personalities that make them unique in form and function. I gotta be honest, going into Resident Evil 9, I had no idea they intended to do zombies the way they did. I expected the traditional run-of-the-mill vanilla zombies. But by giving them habits, it added an additional depth to the gameplay that was, in my opinion, necessary. I think we reached a fever pitch in Resident Evil 4 Remake in what an action-oriented Resident Evil game should look like. So going back to Requiem with regular zombies would have been a rather drab affair. I believe our focus would have been on the restrictions now placed on us, especially after playing as Leon S to the EXY Kennedy in the last game. But giving these zombies habits allows us new approaches and opportunities for distracting and dispatching them in fun and unique ways. Before we leave this area, I have to mention the blister heads. This was a great nod to the crimson heads we had in the original Resident Evil. And just like the crimson heads of old, I stayed well clear of these guys as much as I could. Unfortunately, this is where the unique zombies end and we start to see repeating generic zombies. But that doesn't really matter in this case because zombies are the least of your problems. This segment, man, I took my time with this place. But don't get it twisted. No, I wasn't savoring every moment. It was more like outright fear paralysis. Just to be clear, what you're seeing on screen is my victory lap. In my first playthrough, I was nowhere near as fearless as you see here. Also, I was playing on classic difficulty, which meant limited saves, and that added an extra layer of tension to the mix. This was a game of cat and mouse, and what it did remind me of was Amnesia the Bunker, a game that I couldn't get through because it proved to be too much. What I appreciate about this segment was the concept of safety in the light. We've seen this stalker dynamic before, but one thing that never made sense to me was how the stalker would follow you all the way around the map but stop dead at the safe room. In Resident Evil 9 it makes more sense. The chunk is too big to fit through the doors, and the girl, as this monstrosity is called, can't stand in the light. I really enjoyed the tension of the segment and its manipulation of light to create these moments of sheer panic and terror. Now let's discuss what I thought was the highlight of the whole package. This is what I want to see more of going forward. The whole Raccoon City segment is what I look for in a game. Huge action boss fights, tight claustrophobic battles, creepy stealth sequences, hidden rewards, steady weapon upgrades, and most of all, satisfying and incredibly fun moment-to-moment combat. Where do we even begin? Let's start with the setting itself. Returning to Raccoon City was every bit nostalgic as you'd expect it to be, from revisiting iconic landmarks to tying up loose ends. But more than that, it allowed us to explore the ruins of the city in broad daylight. This is not something you often see in horror games for obvious reasons. Darkness is just inherently scarier than light, isn't it? But the way I see it is that Capcom wanted you to play and enjoy Leon at his ass-kicking best. Let's be honest, it's hard to be afraid of anything as Leon beyond Resident Evil 2, so the darkness itself is a bit redundant. Plus, setting it in the day allows you to get a better sense of the scale of the map. Speaking of which, large open spaces is not something you typically see in horror games, as we know monsters are scariest when they're hot on your heels. But here, large spaces indicate a much needed moment of respite between encounters. By the way, I would love to see more horror games with this kind of open level design. We see it briefly in The Evil Within 2 and more so in The Last of Us 2, but I can't recall anything else beyond that. But getting back to RE9, this is what I love about this place. Even though every location is connected to one large map, every new route feels like a roller coaster experience in itself, each with its own flavor of gory thrill. From dank flooded loading areas all the way to crumbling skyscrapers, Raccoon City has so many fun, diverse set pieces that changes up the zombie culling formula at regular intervals. And let's talk about the combat. Leon plays like an absolute unit in this one. Starting with a trusty axe that is now repairable on the fly means you'll never be without essential abilities like sneak attacks, counters and grapple breaks. Having access to his full suite of melee abilities at all times is a welcome change, as worrying about durability in the heat of battle can be a momentum killer. Let's be honest, having limited use of knives in previous games and constantly managing its durability was never a fun part of the gameplay loop. Yeah though, you can go to town on these zombies and even take on hordes with the axe alone. But here's one area where the game falls a bit short in my opinion. The gunplay feels like a bit of a downgrade. Resident Evil 4 Remake had some of the best gunplay in a third-person shooter, and somehow RE9 feels ever so slightly inferior to that. I can't quite put my finger on it, but I suspect it might be the faster pace of the action itself. It also may be the more arcadey feeling of the updated system, if that makes any sense. Or maybe just the manner in which zombies react to being shot that doesn't quite feel the same. Either way, it's far from bad, but just not as good as RE4. One other way it falls short is the weapon offerings and upgrades. You see, my main weapon of choice in RE games are pistols. To me, there are very few actions in games that can match the feeling of doming a zombie with a chunky pistol shot and following it up with a roundhouse kick. So imagine my genuine disappointment to find out there's only one pistol offering in the game. What's even more disappointing is that it was better in every way to the starter pistol, but at the same time, it was suppressed, which I absolutely hated. I love the chunky sounding alligator snapper, but it had no redeeming qualities over the Silencer 9. I still used the alligator on my first playthrough though. In fact, I used all the original weapons in my first playthrough. I just prefer the older weapons over the military grade ones. But getting back to my point, I wish the weapon offerings were more nuanced than simple straight up improvements over your initial weapons. Yeah, there's a few weapons to unlock after you beat the game, but it would be nice to have more options on your first playthrough. Now, before we move on, let's talk about the motorbike chase scene, which goes down as my favorite on-rail shooter segment of any game. Usually, I roll my eyes whenever I'm forced to sit through these moments, but here I had this huge stupid grin on my face the whole way through. It was marvelously ridiculous, complete with over-the-top spectacle and corny one-liners to top it off. And while I'm at it, I just want to say how Capcom has really leaned into the cheesiness with Leon. Everything out this guy's mouth is gold. Not incredibly witty, but simply just so 90s action hero cheesy, and I really appreciate it.
Pups could use more training.
Before we tie this one off neatly with a blood-soaked ribbon, let's package in a few smaller issues and highlights worth mentioning. Let's begin with the point system. I didn't like the idea of getting points for killing zombies. I thought it was a bit too gamey, if you understand what I mean. But at the same time, so is finding hundreds of coins on villagers or crystals in Lady D's corpse. On the plus side, it's the most consistent currency we've seen in these games. So it grew on me, or I should say I learned to accept it, or maybe I just ignored it. Either way, it bothered me at first, but I felt at peace with it by the end. While we're here, I gotta mention the zombies in Raccoon City. While sand-dwelling zombies are a really cool idea, I think they were a bit repetitive, especially after seeing what's possible in the first act of the game. Now, I don't expect that level of variety in this segment, but I would have appreciated a few more model types like zombies cut at the torso, or missing limbs, or maybe even different clothing depending on where you find them. It's not a train smash. At the end of the day, you only see them for a few seconds at a time before blowing their heads off anyway, but the repetition shows through after a while. Next, I want to highlight the commander fight. While I'm not going to spoil what happens there, if you know, you know. This part gave me goosebumps, then and even thinking about now still does. Lastly, Victor Gideon. I don't see much love for this character. In fact, I don't really see any mention of him when people discuss the game. Personally, I think he's a bit too theatrical and evil for the sake of fulfilling that bad guy role, but there are points where his unpredictable side shines through, and I would have liked to have seen more of this part of him. On the other hand, he had to compete with a truly memorable performance from Grace's character, and that would be a hard ask of anybody.
I've done it.
Well, that's it for Resident Evil Requiem. I hope you guys enjoyed my take on a few parts of the games, but not everything. There's still much to discuss. But if you feel different about anything in any way, please let me know in the comments what you think. And please elaborate. I'm genuinely interested to know what you guys thought of the game. But anyway, that's it from me. I want to thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye.